Very nice. Nice job, Joe. Sean Hammond with PremierGuitar.com here. We're at Winter NAMM 2015 in Anaheim, talking to Stephen Fryette, badass amp designer here. Stephen, you've got a really cool new amp here, cool looking, but I mean, for people who know your stuff, this is a whole new vibe for you. Maybe not all in terms of tone, but just the look especially.
Yeah, it's actually not new for me at all. It's what I've always been about. The whole high gain specialty that we're supposedly attached to is largely created just like when you're in a band and you get pigeonholed as a certain kind of band and can't play the kind of music. That's just how people see you.
It's what your clientele wanted.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that that's what you're about.
Right.
And so when I'm thinking about what am I about, what are we about, what do we do, and besides solving problems for guitar players and trying to make really good quality gear, what is out there that's unexplored, you know?
Mm-hmm.
What conventions can be knocked down, and what can you show people that they're not expecting to see, which is a really difficult thing to do in one way, but there's a way to do it, and the way to do it is to go back in history and not try to recreate a history, but look at where history took certain things, and you can see a break in the road. And what I did here is I basically put myself back in that road and took a different path. If I'd have been designing amplifiers in 1946, what would, and I was the person that I am normally, the person who likes to throw everything against the wall anyway, what would I do? And instead of a head and a combo being a head and a cabinet being a head and a cabinet, could that head and a cabinet be a different kind of a configuration? Could it have evolved a different way? And so I just let that whole thing play out, and that was the result of it. I try not to force a design. I just try to let whatever is coming out play itself out and see where it goes.
You definitely threw me for a loop, because when I was shooting pictures to put on Facebook, I moved the little head type box thing there because I thought it was a separate product, and I was shooting it, and then Neil came back and was like, oh, we got to make sure that's up there. I was thinking like, oh, that's like an old D'Armond style tremolo, or like a I don't know, a smoke machine or something, but
yeah. Exactly. Well, it was actually inspired by a 30s Telefunken microphone power supply.
Nice. So,
I just happened to see the box and I liked the way it looked, and I thought, how could I do that?
But it sounds like what you were getting at, maybe this is the perception I have, correct me if I'm wrong, but so rather than go with the traditional, like either just a combo or a cabinet and a head, you've got kind of a somewhere in the middle with like, is this box sort of like the power amp, but there's the preamp stuff is still in the cabinet, or?
Exactly, and the speaker and the reverb. Now imagine that you're going to a gig, and when you go to a gig and you set up your gear and you tune your guitar, and there's people in the audience, they're sitting at tables and drinking or whatever, and they're watching you, and there's maybe some guitar players in the audience, and they're checking out your rig and stuff, and I see that pedal, and they're using that amp and that guitar and blah, 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 and what kind of pickups are those, and people do that,
Yeah.
And it's...
Were we just playing mind games with them? So they'd be like, what is that green box?
If I'm the player and somebody is paying attention to my gear, I'm like happy to discuss that.
Mm-hmm.
If I have an opportunity to twist somebody's brain and that develops into a different kind of a conversation about gear, or just to, like you said, just to screw with people, that's okay.
There's got to be more about why the power section's out of the cabinet, though, right?
So we're getting sort of conversant with Facebook, a couple of years ago, and starting to do little things to illustrate how we operate, how we work, what happens on a day-to-day basis in our shop. And the other thing is I use CAD and a lot of modern design tools, design stuff. And when I want to try something different, and I don't want to spend 6 weeks doing a CAD iteration and all this kind of stuff, what can I do? Well, I can go back like we used to do it and just take some metal out and drill some holes and put something together, see what happens. And this just kind of developed out of that. And what it is I put the preamp, like you said, in the speaker cabinet, and the power amp in a separate enclosure just to see, because I just thought it would be fun. It looked
tinkering
cool.
around.
I was just tinkering around, and then I thought this could actually work on a lot of levels. You get the transformers and the weight out of the cabinet. You get the weight out of the cabinet like you do with a head in a cabinet. You get the tubes away from the speaker magnet, and the speaker is always the thing that's damaging the power tubes because of the low frequencies mainly. Because power tubes wear in the low frequencies more quickly than because of the mechanical vibration.
Right.
Mechanical vibration is what does power tubes in more than, say, preamp tubes. So power tubes tend to have low frequency rattle, and speakers aggravate that. So and a magnet may also have a big magnetic field, and the tubes are really close to that. That's going to impact the performance of the power tubes. So what if you just take all that out of the equation? You move all that, and then but just as a coincidence, the power amp and the cabinet are almost the same weight, and they're both very light and easy to carry. So you go into a club, you're setting it up, and some guy goes, "What are you doing?" "Oh, I'm setting up my amp." And, "Well, what's that?" "Well, that's the other half."
It's my film projector from 1955.
Exactly. And then they're going like this, and then you just play one chord, and you look at the look on their face, it just says you won them. That's the best part.
It sounded great when Joe was playing it earlier. We'll have Joe play again in a second, but tell us a little more about the power section. What are the tubes? And
so it's a 25 watt 6L6 amp, and it's got 2 rectifier tubes, 5 Y3s or 5 AR4s, depending on how you want to order it. It's a very custom ordered job. We only make about 10 a year. And it's got a 6SN7 driver tube, which is a big bottle dual triode. It's a big fat version of a 12AX7.
Okay.
So, which is what was used in 50s and 40s amps. So the preamp is pretty straight ahead. It's just volume, treble, and bass. A bright switch, the tremolo on-off, and the reverb circuit. So the signal goes through the preamp.
So you plug into the cabinet.
The signal goes out the back through an umbilical that sends voltage up to the preamp and brings signal back from the preamp into the power amp. And then
with the Nutric XLR connection.
Right. And then the power amp output goes from the speaker cable out back into the cabinet. So it's a little on a Rube Goldberg side, but it just leaves a lot of room for experimentation. And
what's the little switch on the back? That little slider.
That's the ambient switch. It's basically like a damping switch, so that you can have a tight focus response or looser, more open, airy response. And the graphic designer at our company knows that I'm an atomic bomb history freak, and always fascinated with that kind of thing. Read a lot of books about electrons and so she put an orbiting electron around the A and the Aether logo, just to give me a laugh, and I really liked it. And we started talking about the Hadron Collider, and so to break up this space, which had all these vents and then this dead spot here, she put a line here to break the space up, and then just extended that concept through to there. So it could be kitschy, but it actually has some really legitimate follow-through in connection to the way that people operate here.
So what's inside the cabinet? That's sort of a new thing too.
Well, that's the culmination of a career-long dream of mine to be involved with Fane, and I've always really liked Fane speakers, and I've always felt that there was a real place in the market for them, and that they should be around. And I actually did get an opportunity to contact them and share with them what I felt a viable vision for Fane in the United States should be.
So there's a new line, and we can look at that later, but there's a new line of 4 different models, a couple that are more modern voiced, a couple that are sort of vintage voiced. They're not necessarily reissues though, right?
Right, and they're not, but they do embody the sort of some of the key essential characteristics of Fane with some refinements. And I just felt that this would be a great thing to kick it off, and I sent them photographs of it and some clips, and I said, this is how I see you guys in my life. And if you would like to accommodate me, I could bore you to death with 19,000 paragraphs of ideas about my vision for your company, and you can tell me to go to hell, or you can only accommodate me a little bit. And they jumped in and they accommodated, and they made me a beautiful speaker, and it just tied the whole thing together.
Is there any sort of tonal reference point you would give to compare what's in this to something that a broader range of guitars could say, like, oh, it sounds like that?
Well, within the context of how people sort of understand Alnico speakers, it's sort of in a similar vein, but it's just a different expression of it. Like I said, it has the classic Fane voicing, which has got this nice clarity, and the vowel sound is what I really pay attention to. Like the Celestians, for example, they have more like an E vowel sound, E, which is what Marshalls also kind of have. It's sort of a trait of the amp. I always think of the amplifier sounds in terms of vowel sounds, and I like a ah vowel sound, and a lot of people like an E vowel sound. It's just a personal preference. And the Fane speaker has this sort of ah quality, so it's consistent throughout the design of the amplifiers that we make, that it have that character, and so it helps to keep the fizziness out of the equation. When you're pushing the speaker hard, you don't hear fizz as much as you hear more note value. I would say maybe on Celestians you hear more of the upper harmonics, you hear more of the harmonics and less of the fundamental, and with Fanes you hear more of the fundamental and less of the harmonics, but not radically so, just enough to make it a different flavor, right? And really that's what it's all about. It just happens to suit me.
You have a really interesting way of looking at things. It's very unique. And the more I hear you describe the amp, the more I'm like, man, I want Joe to play it some more so we can hear it some more. Should we let Joe take a couple cracks at different...
What I want to do is I want to turn the volume way up and have him start by playing quiet and then gradually build it up, because that's really the way the amp works well. So I'm turning the volume 3/4 of the way up, and I'm going to let him just play whatever he wants to play at whatever level of gain, just by using the guitar volume.
So my volume is, we're looking at 4 right now, okay? So.
That sounds awesome. Now, a couple questions. What's that?
It's just, from nothing to everything, almost all just in your right hand.
Yeah, incredibly dynamic.
Yeah.
So, a couple questions come to mind before we wrap it up. So, it has a great sounding reverb. Is that like a long spring tank, or?
That is a long spring tank with a medium decay. It sounds like a long decay because it's the way that the drive circuit is designed to hit it.
And then what kind of tremolo circuit is in there?
It's kind of an unusual one. It's a conglomeration of a couple things, but the key feature about it is that it pushes rather than ducks.
Taking wave volume, okay.
It's doing this instead of this. And,
right.
And there's a real beauty to that I'd like to sort of illustrate, if I could for a sec, in that it maintains the sustain, so you can actually play single note passages without losing sustain and without having the notes drop out. You can turn the guitar all the way up and swamp out the tremolo so you don't hear it, so you can actually solo without turning the tremolo off, and then gradually back the guitar off, and the tremolo will fade back in. So, I mean, it's designed to be an instrument that tracks the player and let the player express himself as much as they possibly want to.
It sounds amazing.
So just like slam on it.
Yeah, let's hear that real quick and then.
And then.
Just like a chord.
Hit a power chord and let it fade out. So it has that sort of this kind of a quality. I don't know what you call it.
I love that.
But
That should be an animated GIF.
yeah.
All right, so we could talk about this all day. I want to play it sometime, but we got to get going on
Okay.
to this next stack of stuff you got here.
This is a completely different mindset. This is the GPDI desktop recording amp. It's a 1 watt amp with a wide range preamp that can go from very clean to very overdriven, which is not anything, mind blowing.
Like 3-band active EQ or parametric or just
a standard passive interactive tone control circuit.
is it like cascading gain?
No, this is actually there's the same preamp structure as the deliverance and a little bit of the pitbull voicing thrown in, which you can select. Gain 1 is a gain that when you turn it up it gets thicker, and when you turn it down it gets brighter.
Here it says
Right.
voicing.
Right.
Okay.
So with this, you set the timbre as well as the guitar pickup sensitivity. The next one is just a full range gain, higher or lower.
Okay.
So once you sort of get the tone controls where you like them, which is really easy to do, you spend much more of your time voicing the deliverance
The
and
character of the
just
distortion.
just by rationing the sound, the gain between these two controls and setting the voicing here. So this is a clean, round voicing, and this one's got a little bit more aggression like the deliverance, and this one's just like in your face, like the pitbull.
Now,
And
the
then-
more or less, is that like more gain or like sort of a fat
Yeah,
switch?
it's just a simple, fun way to say there's more gain. Yeah, it's an additional gain stage, and then that feeds into the master volume, and that whole preamp is triggering our dynamic sensing circuit, which we patented a long time ago, and we still use it. We use it in a few products, and it just tracks the sensitivity of the guitar pickup, and will duck the voltage on the preamp tubes when you get it to a certain level, and you can set where that level is. So you want to set it so it just barely hits, so it behaves like a guitar amp when you smack on strings, and it opens up and sort of blooms when you're playing lightly. And then
So speaking of tubes, sorry to interrupt,
Sure,
but what tubes are in it? Is it
this has got 3 12AX7s and a 12 DW7. And a DW is basically it's half of an AU and half of an AX.
okay?
And the AU is a medium gain, lower impedance drive tube. It's used to drive the output transformer, and the other half of it is a 12AX7 style stage, which has a lot of gain, which can drive the drive stage. So that's used to accomplish the real guitar amp feel. Is actually more like a Class A B style amp than a single-ended triode amp, which they have entirely different characters. And since this is more of a modern kind of a vibe, I needed a power amp that could create those modern tones. And so it's a pretty unique design. It's a specially designed output transformer that behaves differently than just a little
And you
triode
like those
preamp.
esoteric tubes, don't you?
I just, the tubes are back in production. There's 2 manufacturers that produce them, JJ and Electro Harmonics. And, when
So why not
when
explore
the
them?
manufacturer is providing you the raw materials to do things with gear, then you take
I
advantage.
say that in admiration because there's so many amps that just have the same old, predictable, good types of tubes, but
You can hit a wall and go down a wrong road, but you don't know until you try it, right? So that's
all right. So Stephen, looks like there's also a cabinet and mic simulation section.
it's an analog cab simulation filter, and most of the time they tend to sound better than digital ones because they have the upper harmonic qualities the digital ones usually don't get. They tend to be more one-dimensional because you set them a certain way, and they're not normally variable. This has actually got 2 cab filters running in parallel, and you can ratio between the 2 of them. So one is more of like an open back or modern style, and I say open back and modern style because a modern style 412 cabinet has very similar characteristics to like a super reverb open back 410. They just have some sonic similarities. And so that's one filter, and the other filter is, more of like like a beat up Marshall cab type of voicing, not exactly that, but more in that vein. And then you can ratio between the 2 of those to create very recognizable and very usable cab simulations without relying on models that tend to sort of limit you. So then when you mic a cab, if you're playing loud, the microphone behavior comes into play. So you want to try to get some of these microphone harmonics in there and microphone distortion characteristics. And so you're able to blend in some high frequency harmonics and harmonic distortion artifacts manually, so that when you record and listen to your recorded guitar back, you hear that sizzle and sparkle that a cabinet will give you that a digital model will not. Wow. So that takes care of that. And then
you're like a little mad scientist, aren't you? Not mad, I'm sorry.
Angry scientist, you know.
All right, so
angry drunk scientist.
Moving right along. So
we have the switch that disables the cab sim so that you can use an IR if you want to, and then this switch is the amp direct select. And
so you
what
can
I
use
mean
this to drive a cab or go direct to your board.
Actually, that and it's a direct box as well. So it's got why it's called a valvulator is because it's got our valvulator buffer circuit in it. So when you plug the guitar in, you have a direct out so that you can have a dry, clean performance that you can record on a separate track and use that for reamping later. And a second output that selects between that output and the amp output. So if you have a dedicated reamp signal already, but you need that signal copied elsewhere, you don't have to go repatch and reconfigure your DAW. You just switch the jack and route the signal that way as well. So it just makes desktop recording a little bit more convenient.
Awesome. All right, so give me the 30-second pitch on this one so we can let you guys go. And
30-second pitch is it makes a big amp whisper and a little amp scream. It's an attenuator and a reamper. You put a big amp in it to attenuate it down, and the beauty of it is no step switches, continuously variable volume. So you can put a little amp, a 15 watt, 5 watt, 1 watt amp in here and crank it up to 50 watts and play a live gig with it. You could put a stock plexi in here and turn it down to club volume level, and it's got an effects loop in it, so you can basically put a reverb between your head and cabinet. And in addition to that, the problem with most attenuators is they break the continuity between the output of the amplifier and the interaction with the speaker. So by having a tube power amplifier do the work of moving the speaker, that reactivity and interreaction is restored. So what you get back is playing feel even at low volumes. So the amplifier is behaving and getting pushed hard like you like, but the speakers are being manipulated by the power amp the way you're used to. So those two elements combine together to form a low volume cranked amp playing experience that feels right, not just sounds tolerable at a low volume.
And I gotta say, we've talked to a lot of people with great products at this show, but the stuff you've shown us here is some of the most out of the box, intriguing and cool stuff, like not just yet another one of something else. Not that those products aren't good, but you're thinking differently, and I think that's really cool. And I'm sure a lot of people are intrigued and would like to learn more. Where can they go online to read about this stuff more?
They can go to www.fryette.com. They can go to our Facebook page, Facebook/Fryette Amps, and they can send us emails. They can see me wandering down the street muttering to myself at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Let's leave that stuff out of this, Stephen, all right? No, thanks, Stephen. Thank you, Joe. Thanks for watching, guys. It's Sean Hammond with PremierGuitar.com.